We welcome you back to CBS Mornings. We've got big breaking news right now, so let's bring in all of our local stations for this special report. This is a CBS News special report. I'm Gayle King with Tony Dokoupil and Nate Burleson. We are here in New York, and the White House has just confirmed that the United States and Russia have agreed to a prisoner swap to free basketball star Brittney Griner.
Very big news indeed. The two-time Olympic gold medalist for Team USA was released just minutes ago in exchange for convicted Russian arms dealer Viktor Bout. Known as the man who makes war possible, he was serving a 25-year sentence in the U.S. for conspiring to kill Americans and conspiring to sell weapons to a terrorist organization.
And if you don't remember what happened, Griner was detained in Russia in February after airport security found vape canisters containing cannabis oil in her luggage. In August, she was sentenced to 9 years in prison for drug possession and smuggling.
Well, Face the Nation moderator and chief foreign affairs correspondent, that's Margaret Brennan, is with us now from Washington. Margaret, this is so exciting and such welcome news. What can you tell us about this exchange?
It absolutely is, Gayle, and this is a big deal for the Biden administration. A U.S. official has confirmed the transfer has taken place this morning, just within the past few moments. Brittney Griner was transferred into U.S. custody. Now, the prisoner swap took place on an airport tarmac in the United Arab Emirates. That was the agreed upon neutral point for a U.S. government plane carrying arms dealer Viktor Bout to meet up with a Russian aircraft carrying the 32-year-old American basketball star. President Biden authorized this swap just last week. Griner's first action, we expect, after these 9 months of imprisonment, will be to soon undergo a medical evaluation. This is standard operating procedure. This is something that is expected to occur at a U.S. military base, and she will have to clear that before returning to the United States.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Margaret, you know, everybody wants to know, how soon can she be back on U.S. soil?
Well, that medical evaluation has to first take place, Gayle, and I want to point out here that the very fact that the transfer happened at all is huge because the diplomacy had been stalled for so long, and it all came together just within the past few weeks. Now, this is a one-for-one swap. The reason that is important is because the Biden administration has been trying for months to get out two Americans, Brittney Griner and Paul Whelan. He is a U.S. Marine veteran who has been behind bars since 2018. At this hour, CBS is reporting that it is just a one-for-one swap, that Paul Whelan remains in Russian custody at the moment, but Brittney Griner is now in the hands of U.S. officials with U.S. custody, no longer behind bars, no longer in Russia, now in the United Arab Emirates. So this is a big breakthrough for the administration, and we'll be getting further details and reporting. Yeah, I just want to make this point here to you because I think it's important disclosure to our viewers. CBS first learned that this swap was going to happen last Thursday, and CBS News agreed that the Griner for Bout swap, which we knew was underway, that we would not report on the details of it. This was at the request of the White House, which asked us not to make it public because officials expressed grave concern about the fragility of the emerging deal and feared it would impede the safety, perhaps even put those Americans at risk. And so we are bringing this news to you first this morning, Gayle, and it is certainly good news for the Griner family.
It is so exciting, and of course, we kept our word on that.
Of course.
We've known about it for some time. Just to see it happen and come about, Margaret, I can't tell you how excited everybody is that was pulling for Brittney Griner. This is such great news. Thank you, Margaret.
That's right, Margaret. We'll check back in with you a little bit later. And yes, CBS did hold up our end of the bargain. And speaking of that bargain, we do expect to hear from President Biden real soon. Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes joins us right now. Nancy, good morning. What are we hearing?
Good morning, Nate. We have some new information. We were told by a U.S. official a short time ago that the president this morning spoke by phone with Brittney Griner herself and with her wife, Sherelle. We're told that the vice president was in the room in the Oval Office when that call took place. And you can only imagine what kinds of emotions were expressed on that phone call. We know that President Biden has been monitoring this exchange all morning long here at the White House, and we can also tell you that he personally signed the commutation of Viktor Bout's sentence within the past week, which paved the way for this morning's swap. And now, this deal appears to have come together quite quickly within the past 2 weeks, according to our reporting, because as recently as the end of November, the State Department was still blasting the Kremlin for a failure to bargain in good faith. Over the summer, White House officials repeatedly told us that they had made an offer for a prisoner swap, but that they were getting no response. Now, that's not the type of thing that they usually reveal publicly, but in this case, they said they felt they had no choice but to up the public pressure because they were getting radio silence from the Russians. Now, Griner's return for Bout is the Biden administration's second prisoner swap with Russia. Back in April, they swapped Marine veteran Trevor Reed for a Russian who had been convicted of smuggling cocaine. At the time, the U.S. used flight tracking services to make sure that the prisoner exchange was taking place as planned. And that's something they may have used today again during the exchange of Griner, who was coming from Russia, and Bout coming from the United States. Now, we don't know exactly where Griner's plane is going to be headed next, but we do know that the eventual destination, of course, is here in the U.S.
All right, Nancy, thank you so much. You know, we had the interview with Cherelle Griner, who is Brittney's wife, a couple of months ago, and she was saying that she had spoken to her on the phone and she was so worried about her mental health that Brittney Griner was very worried that she might have been forgotten in this country. And certainly that has not been the case. People have been working on it, and I can't only imagine. I had reached out to Cherelle last week when we knew that this was happening. Of course, she's not saying anything. Nobody wanted to do anything that would jeopardize this day. And now that it is here,
I remember you sitting down with her and asking you, does she have hope? And you said that's all she can is have hope. But you said there was some despair that she had in her eyes because she just did not know. Now she has the answers that we've all been waiting for, which is Brittney is coming home.
We want to see that plane land safely. Also, eager for news on her health. I mean, Brittney was in a penal colony for multiple weeks. The conditions are reputed to be very bad. So we shall see.
The labor, the nutrition, even her mental health.
Yeah, it's been a year, right? Almost.
It's been more, This is, I can barely speak. I'm so excited about this news today. Senior investigative correspondent, that's Catherine Herridge, has covered this story since it began. Catherine, Brittney Griner, as we know, is not going to go home immediately. We know that she has to go to a hospital first. Can you walk us through the process about what will happen to her now? What are the steps?
Well, Gayle, good morning. This is really the beginning of a journey for Brittney Griner and her family. And while every case is unique, it comes down to a three-phase process. First, as you and Margaret mentioned, a medical and mental health evaluation. Second, what intelligence officials refer to as a strategic debriefing. This generally involves the intelligence agencies as well as law enforcement to understand every element of Brittney Griner's detention, also the conditions, and more specifically, whether the Russians sought to obtain intelligence or information from her. And finally, reintegration. Many hostages I've spoken to discuss how there can be this sense of sensory overload after their captivity and the challenges of reuniting with their family after an experience where they feel they've become a changed person.
Catherine, you recently spoke to some of the federal agents who were involved in the apprehension of Viktor Bout. These are complicated trade-offs, high diplomatic discussions, but I am curious, what did those agents tell you about this man, Viktor Bout, who is now free and going back to Russia?
Well, former DEA agents that were directly involved in this global manhunt for Viktor Bout told us that they've always seen him as a major threat to U.S. national security because he was an arms dealer with global reach because of his deep Russian connections. He was someone who was willing to sell arms to drug cartels, to designated terrorist groups, and individuals with the intent and the capability of harming U.S. Americans and officials. In addition, what we heard from these former agents is that it was a Herculean effort to capture Bout. across 3 continents. In 2008, in Thailand, he was eventually extradited to the United States, where he was convicted of charges including conspiring to kill Americans. And finally, they told us they want to see the families reunited, but they had deep concerns about any potential trade with Viktor Bout because of the message they felt it would send, that it made good business sense to target Americans.
It's understandable. Catherine, thank you very much. Appreciate that. We're going to bring in now CBS News foreign policy and national security contributor H.R. McMaster, a retired Army lieutenant general, and he's also national security advisor under President Trump. General, good morning to you. We just talked a little bit there with Catherine about how complicated these trade-offs are. Huge day, very significant prisoner swap, one of the most significant of the Biden administration, arguably one of the most significant America has undertaken going all the way back to the 1960s. I think we should start just with your reaction to it.
Hey, good morning, Tony. Well, yeah, I share your sentiment and what Gayle articulated there about how happy we are that Brittney Griner's back. You know, of course, what we're dealing with is a criminal state, all right? We know that Vladimir Putin not only arbitrarily detains innocent people for political leverage, but he also commits murder of individuals and mass murder. You know, what we're seeing in Ukraine and what we saw in Syria and Chechnya from this criminal state. But I think what's really important to note is that a lot of people have been working on this for a long time, and I think it's important to recognize that the Biden administration prioritized, getting Brittney Griner back. They've also prioritized getting others out, like Trevor Reed. And I think this is an important duty for every administration. I remember when Aya Hijazi was released under the Trump administration, or Chaplain Brunson from Turkey. Now, those were from ostensible, partner states. But it's even tougher, to get people out of Russia. And I'll tell you, Tony, it's also important for us to keep in mind those who are left behind. I'm sure that this is what Brittney Griner will make this point as well. This is Paul Whelan and Mark Fogel, for example, who remain unlawfully detained in Russia.
All right, General.
We're thinking about them also today. As happy as we are for Brittney Griner, no one is forgetting the 2 other Americans who are there.
Absolutely. General McMaster, thank you very much. We appreciate your perspective on all this. But we want to emphasize it is a great day. President Biden expected to speak soon. We will, of course, bring you that live when it happens, if it happens during our show. And our coverage of Brittney Griner's release will continue on CBS News streaming and also your local news. And, of course, as normal, we have much more news ahead on CBS Mornings. This has been a CBS News special report. I'm Tony Dokoupil with Gayle King and Nate Burleson, CBS News, New York.